Oh, I've got gas. Man, I always mess up the beginning of the stream. Hey, welcome to the stream. Happy Halloween, everybody. I guess it's Halloween. It's that spooky time of year. I don't really have anything Halloween themed planned, but I decided to decorate a little bit in the spirit of Halloween. Man, I always mess up the beginning of the stream. Hey, welcome to the stream. It's been a while. Sorry I missed last week. Just been super busy, but happy to be back in the stream. And if you're here, thanks for joining. Please let me know if you can hear me okay and everything's going well. That helps out tremendously because there's a possibility that it's been a while. Sorry I missed last week. Not doing something correctly, but happy to be back in the stream. And if you're here, thanks for joining. I can hear myself coming out of my headphones. Anyway, so today we're going to be taking a look at some new stuff. The Apple M3 lineup of new laptops and iMacs. There's a Sony Alpha event scheduled for December 8th and 9th, I believe, in Japan. New cameras from DJI and Final Cut Pro. Today we're going to be taking a look at automated masking feature. Apple M3 lineup of new laptops and iMacs. There's a Sony Alpha event scheduled for December 8th and 9th. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into the new Gear Roundup. Cameras from DJI and Final Cut Pro. I've got gas masking feature. Apple M3 lineup of new laptops and iMacs. There's a Sony Alpha event scheduled for December 8th and 9th. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into the new Gear Roundup. Okay, starting with the new M3 Max. And it's pretty crazy that I think they just released M2 Max at the beginning of this year. I can't remember the product update cycle 100% because it just keeps coming faster and faster as we get older and older. Okay. But I know that there was new shit. I know that there was new stuff earlier this year, but maybe the M2s started rolling out at the end of last year. But anyway, here we are yet again with the M3 MacBook Pros and some new iMacs using the M3 processor. Unified, but processor. I know that there was new shit. I know that there was new stuff earlier this year. I don't want to get into all of the details necessarily, but anyway, here we are. They're on a new 3-nanometer architecture from TSMC. They are sporting a new hearing echo 3-second delay. So I don't want to okay, hold on. Let me try to figure out necessarily, but anyway, here we are. They're on a new 3-nanometer architecture from TSMC. They are sporting a new. Okay, my bad. How's that? Yeah, cool. I should probably just redo the whole thing because that totally ruined the beginning of that, I'm sure. Okay, anyway, maybe I'll re-record it later. But thanks for telling me, Rambler, and thanks for being here, even though you are working out, I guess. All right. So as I was saying, um, I meant to turn off my stream. That's what you were hearing in the background. They have a new GPU architecture. I don't know the details of that necessarily, like in any sort of like technical way, but there are some new features that are being incorporated into the hardware this time. They have support for hardware ray tracing, mesh shaders, and something that's called dynamic caching. And hardware ray tracing has been available on the Windows side of things for several years now. Obviously, that gets better with each new generation of graphics cards that come out. So there's definitely a head start on the Windows side with ray tracing. And mesh shaders is interesting because that's also been available on Windows for a few years, but it's taken a while for it to get adopted by software developers. And I don't know if anyone out there is into games, is really into games, but Alan Wake 2 just came out this past week. And I believe it's the first game on any sort of significant scale to utilize mesh shaders. And the I don't really know much about. I mean, I'm not an engineer and or software developer, but I guess it's a way to have like significantly increased graphical fidelity in terms of like polygons, like the number and density of polygons, but also have like a really efficient rendering pipeline or workflow, so you can have better graphics but also have improved performance. So it's kind of like having your cake and eating it too. But it's not something that's been adopted widely up until now because it's not supported on older hardware. It's not supported on older graphics cards, at least very well. They take a pretty big hit to their performance if they don't have mesh shading sort of built into it. So those two things are, although I guess ray tracing has more applications than just gaming, but that's pretty much its most widely adopted use case up until now. And then the mesh shader thing obviously can be used for all sorts of different kinds of rendering things. But it seems like Apple is incorporating a lot of this technology and really pushing games adoption with on Macs, because for the last 50 years, really Macs aren't really known for being a big gaming platform. I mean, they've got Apple Arcade, but yeah, it's kind of like a simplified sort of like kids kind of thing. So it's interesting that they seem to be pushing the games front. I'm wondering, like, is that just a strategy for Apple to try to increase its market share? They think gaming is going to be or is like a big enough like kind of potential audience or customer base that they could improve like the overall market share for Apple if people look at it as something that can be gamed on. Um, it's also, it's kind of interesting, or it's a little frustrating, I guess, with like this ever increasing, or maybe it just feels that way, sort of like product release cycle where you obviously don't have to buy new computers every year. I think that's just something that happens on YouTube um, because people want to make content. So hopefully people aren't actually out there buying new computers. But it's almost like iPhones where um, I'm sure there is maybe a not insignificant number of people who are upgrading or changing out phones yearly, if maybe every 2 years, maybe every year. And it's obviously not something that needs to happen on the like sort of desktop and laptop um, scale, I don't think. Apple, as usual, has very confusing or very vague or purposefully confusing charts that show performance increases. And I don't have them all pulled up here. You can find them all over the internet. You can watch Apple's keynote. But they have weird references between like the M3 line versus the M1 line and not the M2 line. They also are constantly referring back to like the Intel architecture, which is now 5 years like out of date in terms of like the Intel stuff that was last used on the Mac side. So it's like always very self-serving, obviously, with their graphs and their sort of performance metrics that they're using. They just don't put a lot of information into them. But I mean, again, there's really no reason if you have an M1 and an M2, especially an M2, to really upgrade. But obviously, if you don't have any of those, then you would probably want to just jump on the new architecture, the new stuff, unless the older stuff has a significant price drop, because it doesn't seem like there's going to be a huge performance increase. They also have a significantly larger number of options in terms of all of these tiers. So you've got the base, M3, you've got the M3 Pro and then the M3 Max, but within each of those like segments, there are a larger number of options, and some of them have actually decreased in the number of performance cores. They've lost 2 performance cores, but gained 2 efficiency cores. So it would definitely behoove you to pay really close attention as you're sort of like going through and trying to configure, to pay attention to that stuff, especially if you are upgrading from an M1 or M2 and you think you're getting an upgrade by going to the M3, but if you're losing out on 2 performance cores, then you actually might not be getting much of an upgrade, if at all. Um, it's still insane what. So anyway, let's take a look at. I'm not going to go through and configure one front to back, but let's just take a look at like an M3 Pro. So I think it was like a 12 core CPU instead of an 11 core. They'd have these weird numbers, and we'll kind of get to the reasoning behind that when we look at the what to watch segment. But they're still only offering like a 512 gigabyte SSD as a base, and then if you actually go down to the non-pro, um, there's still no. I think it is a 512 gig for a base on that, but the iMacs, the 24-inch iMacs, have a 256 gig SSD, which is just really inadequate. 512, again, not very. It's just not enough, especially if you're paying $2,000. And then okay, so let's upgrade. Let's choose this one, 12 core, 18 core, and the 18 gigs of unified memory. Interesting memory configuration. So we'll select that one. And we want to upgrade to, let's just go all out and go 16 core, 16 core. That's $700. Okay, nice. And then what do we get for that? That bumped us all the way up to 48 gigs of unified memory, interestingly. But we didn't have to pay more for that, I guess? No, I don't know. Let's not do that. Let's just stay at the base. Okay. So to double our memory, it's $400. And to double our storage, it's $400. Are these prices lower or less than they used to be? I'm not sure. Anyway, it's crazy because a 1 terabyte SSD is not $400, and it's weird because everybody's always saying unified architecture, unified memory on the M1 side or the Apple Silicon side is so magical, whatever. But if you just compare like speed for speed, like for like, you can go out and buy a little drive like this from Best Buy or wherever, Amazon, for a fraction of the cost that you're going to pay for these upgrades from Apple. And the speeds are just as fast. And I know that there's architectural differences, so maybe that unified system, makes a 700 makes like essentially the same speed of the hard drive work faster on a Mac. I'm not really sure, but it's crazy how much they're still charging for all of these sort of basic upgrades, especially when they give you such an inadequate amount to begin with. It would just be nice if they would get serious about that and not really try to gouge you on stuff that you can easily upgrade on the Windows side. And it's weird because like these are so sort of like easily obtainable on Windows in the Windows world that I just have random 2 terabyte SSDs just kind of lying around, not in use. And I've also got like 64 gigs of RAM that I'm not using. That's not a smart thing, but this one doesn't work actually. I need to get that one replaced. Anyway, we'll kind of come back a little bit to the M3 stuff later, as I mentioned when we talk about the what to watch segment. Another thing, and I've watched a couple videos about this, people are pretty reserved, I guess, in their praise or their evaluation of these new computers. Of course, nobody has them yet to really compare with the existing ones. But what's exciting a lot of people is the space black. Is that what it's called? The I don't know what space black is. It's black. There's a new anodized black color option. So now you can get black, gray, and silver on the MacBook Pro. All right, let's move on to. Oh, I don't think I have a website. Sony is supposedly doing an event. I don't know what this event is going to be, but it's going to be November 8th and 9th in Japan. And there's just like a splash page on a website saying Apple Alpha, or excuse me, saying Sony Alpha event. A lot of people have been speculating for months now, and by a lot of people, I mean Sony Alpha rumors and people who are in that sphere, that there's going to be a new A9 Mark II. It's been a while. I don't remember when the A9 Mark, did I say A9 Mark II? There's going to be an A9 Mark III. It's been a while since Sony updated the A9 or the Alpha 9 camera. And I can't remember exactly when the A9 II came out. I want to say it was around 2020, but I could be wrong. And I think the whole A9 thing was born sometime in the A7 III generation. So I think it was around 2017, 2018 when the A9 became a thing. It's been a long time, so long, in fact, that I'm not sure if everybody remembers what is the point of the A9 lineup to begin with. I don't know if I really remember what the point is because things have changed a lot since the A9 and the A9 Mark II. If you don't know, it's a full frame camera. It's relatively low megapixel, or that's what it's been historically, and it's a fast camera. So if you remember things like DSLRs, in particular the flagship DSLRs from Nikon and Canon, like the Nikon D5 and the Canon 1DX, those were like these big, chunky, very rugged sort of professional cameras, but they had relatively low megapixels and they were meant for like sports and sort of like action kinds of shooting. So that's where the A9, that's the inspiration of the A9 lineup. I think it was only a 20 megapixel sensor, and it was very fast. So it had a very fast burst rate and a very fast reading sensor. So really minimize any kind of like rolling shutter that you might get if you were using the electronic shutter mode. So that's what everybody's anticipating, obviously, that the A9 Mark III is going to be. People are saying there might be a higher megapixel sensor. So whatever that means, because with mirrorless, the Alpha 1 in particular, and then cameras like the Nikon Z9 and the Canon R3, I believe it is, those were all sort of like very fast cameras, much like the A9 and the 1DX and the Nikon D5, but they also had much higher megapixels than those cameras ever had. So like the Alpha 1, I think, is a 50-something megapixel sensor, but it's a stacked sensor and it has a really fast burst rate, very fast readout. So it sort of like negates, or, it sort of makes the whole idea of like that sports lineup either obsolete, or it just changes it completely into a higher megapixel sort of tier. So it'll be interesting to see what the A9 III brings to the table. If it remains like relatively low megapixel, I wonder what that means in terms of just like its overall features and capabilities. It would have to be like a pretty significant leap forward, something that is offering that's offering things that the A1 can't do, or it should be significantly cheaper. And there's speculation that it's going to be in the $4,000 range. So I guess between $4,000 and $5,000. So that is cheaper than the A1, but it's not. I think the Nikon Z9 has actually seen some pretty significant price drops, and then the Z8 is also in that range too. So again, it's still pretty pricey for something that would be lower megapixel than the A1. So I'll be curious to see what it is. So that's what the rumors are, that's what's going to be announced. And there's also some rumors that there's going to be a new G Master lens, and people are saying that it will be a 30 millimeter. And I don't know that I have any experience or knowledge of a 30 millimeter prime on a full frame. Obviously 28, 35. I've seen a 40 millimeter, and I mean, there's some random weird focal lengths that pop up from time to time, and maybe there has been a 30 somewhere in history, but I'm not familiar with any. So it'll be interesting to see what this is. Being a 30 millimeter, I would imagine it's going to be pretty fast. They already have a 35 millimeter G Master f1.4, so I'd imagine this one is going to be at least a 1.4. But yeah, kind of interesting. Sony has a 28 millimeter f2. That's a really early E-mount lens. It's been out for a long time. I used to have that lens, but it's that's way overdue for an update. Um, so anyway, that's what's rumored to happen at the Sony Alpha event, which is scheduled for November 8th and 9th. So we'll see how it actually plays out. Next, in terms of new stuff, and I know this segment is called New Gear Roundup, but I often will include software things. Final Cut Pro finally gets motion tracking, AI generated motion tracking and rotoscoping and masking, all those kinds of things that have been built into Resolve and After Effects for a few minutes now. I can't remember when the Magic Mask came out in Resolve, but it's been close to a year, if not over a year already. So this is something that's finally coming into Final Cut, but not from Apple. It's actually coming from Motion VFX. And I'm not going to get into like the demo of it. I don't have it for Final Cut Pro, but it is subscription based. So Motion VFX is a very popular sort of plugin maker. They do plugins for, I think they started in Final Cut, but they've branched out over the years into both Premiere and After Effects and also into Resolve. And their stuff runs the gamut. They have like tons of kind of high-end stuff like these trackers, which is included in this subscription plan for Final Cut Pro. But they also do more like basic sort of like titles, like animated titles and overlays. They do LUTs, all sorts of stuff. So it's interesting this one, but in the past, all their stuff has been just you pay for the plugin. It's a one-time fee, and supposedly you're going to have it forever. However, they don't always get supported over time. I noticed, and I was working on a project in Resolve last week, and I was trying to use the M magnifying glass it wasn't working anymore. So I'm not sure if I wasn't doing something right or if it just hasn't been updated with all of the updates in Resolve over the past year. Something was not working anymore. Anyway, let me try to find the sorry, I'm not really ready for this stream 100%. That's okay. Nobody's watching, I don't think. That is okay. If you are watching, thank you and welcome and happy Halloween. Did I ever fix the delay? I think I fixed the delay, but nobody ever confirmed. They probably just got upset and mad and left. Okay, concentrate. What are we doing here? What are we doing? Let's just go to Roto AI. Okay, Roto AI is like the big thing. So this is very similar to the Magic Mask, and there's also something in After Effects. I don't know exactly what it's called. They're offering this as part of this Cine Studio bundle, which is going to be subscription based, and they're offering it in a 14-day free trial. There's apparently a 2D plan, which comes with all of these things, and then the 2D plus 3D plan. See all included products. So the 2D, 3D plan, you're getting all this stuff. It's interesting that they're not offering it as a one-time purchase, like in that maybe you just want this Roto AI and you don't want all this other stuff. But apparently that's just not the business model that they think is going to work for them. So it is subscription based, and it is a yearly subscription for the 2D, 3D plan. And it costs $288 a year, which divided by 12 equals $24 a month, which is a lot, in my opinion, and only seems to be, hey, Wayne, welcome to the stream. Really appreciate it. And thanks for joining. If you have any questions, please hit me up. This streams always go so much better when people have questions. I do have a Q&A like kind of built into the end of the stream, but just throw questions in at any time. Or if you just want to sit back and watch, no worries. But thanks for being here. Yeah, so you get all this stuff. It's a subscription-based plan. It's $24 a month, $288 a year. As opposed to the basically the same kind of things that you have already in Resolve with the magic mask and all of these sort of things. I'm sure you can do essentially in Fusion, in the edit page, in the color page, in Resolve. That's a one-time purchase of around 300 bucks. It's definitely more comparable to After Effects, which I think if you just subscribe to After Effects, that's like $21 a month. But of course, you have everything that you can do in After Effects in addition to like rotoscoping and masking. This is obviously on top of a purchase of Final Cut Pro, which is a bargain, in my opinion, at only about $295, $300 for a lifetime support or a lifetime license. I guess, apparently, maybe that'll change. Who knows? But it's just interesting that um, Final Cut does, Apple doesn't really seem to be in any hurry to join the party in terms of like AI based and sort of like GPU accelerated effects and things that you can do in Final Cut. And they're relying on motion VFX to sort of fill that gap and bring Final Cut Pro more into parity with Resolve and Adobe. I um, I like motion VFX sometimes. I've had an affiliate link with them for years, but I'm not affiliated with them like in any like kind of paid way. I don't even think I've ever made any money with their affiliate link. But I bought some of their plugins in the past, and some of them are great. Like the MTuber plugins are really good if you like to do like those kinds of calls to action kinds of things. Some of their I've used the M Restyle, which is really cool. I like that one a lot. But I've also been very disappointed in some of their plugins, like the M Keynote. I bought that when I was working on a client project that I thought it might have some cool things that would help for that particular client project, and it didn't really work that well. I also tried out, I'm not sure exactly what it's called, but it's essentially like a split screen, picture in picture kind of effect. Maybe it's called M split screen. I don't know. I purchased that one not too long ago and just really was not impressed. And the thing that sucks about them is, again, prior to this, everything was like you pay for the plugin, a one-time payment, and they didn't have any sort of return policy. And there's really no way, you could watch the videos on their site, and maybe you could find some demos and stuff or reviews on YouTube, but there's really no way to try them out. And of course, they make them look amazing on their videos, but especially those two things, the picture in picture and the keynote, I just didn't like them, and you're just stuck. And they usually cost $100. So it's nice, I guess, that they're offering this as a trial that you can sort of test it out. And of course, if it is a subscription, I don't know, it's yearly. I wonder if they'll allow you to cancel it if you don't like it and get your money back. Because I don't think there's any way. I think the 2D plan you pay quarterly, and the 3D plan it looks like you just pay a lump sum for the whole year. Anyway, that's pretty much my spiel on Motion VFX, Cine Studio, and the M Roto AI. All right, let's rapid fire our way through the rest of the new stuff. Okay, next, really quickly, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. The DJI Osmo Pocket 3. This is kind of cool, like I've never paid much attention to these cameras. And I don't know, like, are these really widely used? I feel like I only ever see these when a new one gets launched and everybody makes a video about them, and then a week later, I never see them in use. Maybe I'm just not looking at the right content where people are actually putting these things into use in their workflow. But again, aside from like kind of like that product launch window, when people are trying to get views and make videos about these things, I don't know that they're they're used that much. So let me know. Like, I'd be curious to know if anybody has an Osmo Pocket, whatever generation, and how they use them and how they like them. I watched a few videos about this, and it looks really fun. But I think like I don't know that I would ever. There's that many circumstances that I can see myself ever actually using this, aside from just sort of the novelty. And just like all my GoPros and my 3D action or my 3D cams, um, yeah, they mostly just kind of sit on the shelf or sit in the drawer and don't get much use at all. But anyway, if you are interested in these, this one has a 1 inch sensor, and everybody's sort of like touting this whole 1 inch sensor thing. And I think it's important to know, it's important to kind of like just make sure that people are aware. When they say 1 inch sensor, they don't actually mean that the diameter or the size of this sensor, not the diameter, the diagonal, excuse me, isn't actually 1 inch. Whether that really matters, it's actually here 0.63 inches in on the diagonal length, and there's the long and the short end of an actual 1 inch sensor. And if you're interested to know why they call them 1 inch sensors, then you can check out this website here. Marquise Brownlee made a video about this a couple years ago, I guess. But this isn't like, it's not hard to find this information if you're looking for it. But whether or not it matters, the thing that is important is that it is a bigger sensor than the previous Osmo Pockets, which I think were more like kind of an action cam, sort of like cell phone size sensor. So this one is bigger. So it is going to give you better image quality, better low light performance. It's going to have more shallow depth of field possibilities than the older cameras. I was also curious to know like what is the minimum focusing distance, because that's something that is problematic with action cams. If you're using them as a vlogging camera, they don't often have a close enough minimum focus distance to get yourself in focus if you're holding it out in front of your face. But this one apparently has a minimum focusing distance of only 7.87 inches. So that should be plenty close for you to be in focus if you're just holding it sort of at arm's length or sort of like a relaxed arm's length. And obviously it's a camera on a gimbal. I did see a couple videos where people are walking around with it, and I don't know how easy it is to like change the settings and the follow settings, because it seemed like it was kind of swaying back and forth in an annoying way, where I would have preferred the camera just to be sort of fixed in place, almost like in a motion sickness inducing kind of way. Now it has D-Log and 10-bit recording options. So if you're into doing, more color grading and having more dynamic range and potential image quality, it's nice that you have those. And I don't know much about the focusing system that these had in the past, but apparently this has a phase detect system, so it should have improved autofocus. Again, like if you're more than a few feet away from this camera, it's probably going to have pretty much everything in focus anyway. But yeah, I mean, it's a little bit, I don't know, like it seems a little pricey to me for what you're getting. Um, Obviously, it's just the pocketability of it, which is appealing. It's really lightweight. I guess it's easy to use. It's mostly a touchscreen interface. You've got that little thumbstick on there to control gimbal settings. Obviously, it has follow modes. You can set it down on its little tripod, and it will follow you around. So cool stuff that you can do with it. And then, of course, if you want like the combo kit that increases the price by more than $100, you get a bag, tripod, transmitter, battery handle. It looks fun, but again, I just don't know. Like these seem kind of almost gimmicky to me, but I'd be curious to know if people actually really, get a lot of use out of these, especially with how good phones are getting, phone cameras. I would almost want, like, if I want a small camera, I want it to be something that I can take pictures with as well as shoot video with. And I don't know how good this thing is in terms of like its hybrid use case. Last thing, in terms of new gear, I just recently saw this, a Viltrox 20 millimeter f2.8 that covers full frame. Almond, welcome. Love this series. Are you talking about the DJI Osmo Pocket 3, or are you talking about my live stream? That would be amazing. Probably not my live stream. Anyway, thanks for joining in. The Viltrox 20 millimeter f2.8. This is crazy. A full frame lens that's fully electronic, fully autofocusing is only $158 United States. I checked out the Tamron 20 millimeter f2.8 for Sony a couple years ago, and that lens was okay. It was very cheap, very light, very plasticky, but it was also considerably more expensive than this. I think that lens is now going for $250. So even so, it's still over almost $100 more than this Viltrox. And I don't know anything about like the quality of this lens. I've only seen one video about it, but people are often looking for, what's like the cheap lens, like what's a good lens that I can get, what's a good recommendation for like one lens. And I don't know that this is like a great recommendation for one lens, but it's like you could get two lenses now for a bargain. And even if it's not the best lens ever made, for $158, I think it would be a pretty decent option for a lot of people. I don't know. I'd be curious to check it out. I already have the Sony 20 millimeter f1.8. So this would be a downgrade for me, but that lens is like $900. So it's a lot more money. And I think for, a lot of people, this could sort of be all that they need. Full frame cameras are obviously more expensive. So people are, kind of biting the bullet on a full frame camera and they're looking for lenses that are a little bit more affordable. I'd be curious to know what Viltrox is going to, if they're going to keep going, because they're kind of doing a lot of pro stuff, but their pro lenses are also a little bit less expensive, obviously, than Sony. And this is like definitely the cheapest lens I've ever seen for full frame that's fully electronic and has autofocus. Oh yeah, here we go. I knew you didn't love my live stream. That's okay. I love the 85 millimeter Viltrox FE. They make great budget glass. Yeah, I've always been curious to check out that one. I know they've already done like Mark II versions of a lot of their lenses. Um, but yeah, people have a lot of good stuff to say about them. I've reached out to Viltrox a lot of times over the years, and they've always ghosted me. So I guess if I want to check them out, I just got to buy them. Yeah. Okay, I think that's it for the new Gear Roundup and the rapid fire. So let's move on to what to watch.
I want a refund. I asked for two.
Okay, the NBA season kicked off this past week, so I've actually been watching a lot of basketball and not a lot of YouTube. Um, and I think a lot of the YouTube stuff that I've been watching this past week has been tutorials. I was working on a video and there's stuff that I was trying to figure out how to do. So I'm kind of falling behind a little bit on good recommendations. But if you are interested in the Apple M3 stuff, I really recommend you watching this video from Snazzy Labs. Again, like I mentioned, nobody has these computers yet, so a lot of the stuff is just sort of like impressions and how people think about it. But he has some good information about the whole process node that these computers are utilizing. And you maybe don't really care about that kind of stuff, but if you are interested in how like the sausage gets made on a global scale with all these computers, whether it's Apple, Intel, AMD, etc., most of this stuff is being manufactured, like the CPU, GPU stuff is being manufactured by TSMC. And so they're doing vast majority of all this manufacturing. But when I talked about like all of the different product SKUs that they're offering now with these M3s, it has a lot to do with the process node that Apple's using from TSMC to manufacture these chips. So if you're interested at all in that back end, I would highly recommend you check out this one from Snazzy Labs. It's called Apple M3 Deep Dive, the details most skipped over. And it might give you food for thought if you are the kind of person who likes to upgrade. It might give you some pause about upgrading to the M3 and maybe holding out for whatever comes afterward, because it might be on a better process node and you'll probably see much bigger gains, much bigger improvements than this one. Yeah, that's all that I have for what to watch this week. I mentioned on my last live stream that Killers of the Flower Moon was coming out, and also Michael Mann's Ferrari. That's not coming out until Christmas Day, but I actually did go see Killers of the Flower Moon last weekend, and I saw it in IMAX, and it was pretty epic, I think. I'm not sure if you guys are really interested in like movies, cinema very much, or really want to hear me talk about it. I'm not going to talk about it very much, but I'm not like I highly respect and think Martin Scorsese is an amazing filmmaker. He's definitely one of the masters, one of the directing masters, I think. just a really, really skilled and innovative filmmaker. And now he's on into his, what, ninth decade of life. So he's definitely, getting up there. And I haven't had an opportunity or taken an opportunity in my lifetime to see many of his movies in the theater. So I definitely wanted to check this one out in theaters before I'm sure I don't think it's going to do gangbusters and stay in the theaters for very long. It's going to go to Apple TV. They're the ones who funded it. But his last movie, The Irishman, I think had a very, very limited run in theaters. I think Netflix put it out just so it would be Oscars eligible, and then it went to the streaming platform. But I watched that movie on Netflix, that entire 3 hour movie, like front to back, and I was pretty riveted by that one. So going to see Killers of the Flower Moon in theaters and especially in IMAX, it was. I thought I was going to have to take a bathroom break because they started the movie late. I got there way too early, so it was literally like I was sitting in there for almost 4 hours, I believe, if not 4 hours. But I stuck it out and or toughed it out, and stuck in there the whole 3.5 hour long length of that movie, and it was, I would say, I don't know if it's like a masterpiece, like in terms of just cinematic history, or even if it's like an upper tier or like top five, top 10 Scorsese movie. I guess it's just going to depend on your point of view. But I would be for me, Scorsese can be a little bit hit or miss. Like sometimes his movies, although I think they're all like technically, ambitiously amazing and highly sophisticated and well made. Sometimes I just don't. They don't always speak to me, which is fine. Not every movie's going to speak to you. Like Wolf of Wall Street, for instance, is one movie that I just kind of bounced off of a little bit. Um, yeah, I don't know. But so anyway, this one, I was riveted by it. It's very sad. It's a not a, it's a pretty much a downer. It's a movie about a really dark time, or dark events in American history. It touches on a lot of stuff that they've sort of been dug up, and we're getting more things that have been, I guess, covered up or not, or even just ignored. I think over in history, like in school, in popular history, in the media. So it's definitely not something that's you're going to come out of the theater fist pump or anything like that. But it was definitely cool. And again, if you are a cinema buff, a Scorsese fan, take the advantage and take advantage of this opportunity and go see this one in theaters. I think it's different. Like I said, I watched Irishman at home, and it was amazing. But there's just something about going to the theater that just kind of it focuses you. You don't have all those distractions, and it's just much more easy just to get enveloped in the world that the filmmakers are creating. He worked with a set designer. I don't remember the man's name, but he's also getting up there in age, and they'd never worked together before. But this guy worked on um, what is the one from? Shoot, I should have done some more preparation. But anyway, this guy is just like a really historically detailed and just I don't know, an amazing set designer. And there was a good article in the New York Times about the work that he did on this movie. They did there's a set or there's a location in the movie where they go. It's a barbershop slash pool hall. So people go to get their hair cut, and then on the other side of the room, this huge open space, people are playing pool, and that apparently was like a thing back in like the early 20th century. That they thought that this guy was just kind of making it up as a cool location for a movie, like a cool location for scenes to take place, but it was actually historically accurate. So anyway, that'll be my spiel on Killers of the Flower Moon. Highly recommend you go see it if you are at all interested. So that's everything that I have planned for the live stream. If you have any questions, please hit me up. I had some questions come through earlier from Rambler. I'm not sure if he's here anymore. He said he was going to go to the gym. But I'll just take a crack at some of these questions that he put in here. He asks, can you talk about ISO sensitivity range? A6500 is 25,000 and A6700 is 32,000 max. Is that marginal or significant? Um, let me just see all these are kind of related. And then he says also I see full frame cameras at 52,000 max ISO. How does ISO range affect photo filming? Okay. Um, that's a good question. Good question. I don't know how to answer it. Okay, so first of all, is 25 the difference between 25K and 32K max? I think that's pretty marginal, probably. As you're going up that high in an ISO range on any camera, you're really boosting that signal to the point where you're seeing a lot of noise, because that's what the ISO is doing. It's boosting up the gain, the sort of like electronic sensitivity and activity of that sensor. It's like, it's like turning up the volume on your radio dial. If you turn it up to, the higher you turn it up, the more you're starting to hear like the electronic components of that, and you're hearing that fuzz and that static. That's basically what you're getting with the camera sensor too. So the higher you turn up that ISO, the more you're going to start seeing that sensor noise and all that activity there. Um, it's definitely something that you want to avoid. You don't want to have to crank up the ISO so high that you're going to start degrading the image quality, because not only do you start seeing noise, but you also typically will lose color fidelity. You'll get like color shifts, like it'll start getting green, or kind of grayish. Saturation is not the same. Um, but in terms of just exposure values, I'm not sure if that's a full stop of exposure. If that's one full stop, I'm not really sure. Then that is technically twice as much light or twice as bright of an exposure. So that is, I guess, somewhat significant. But if the picture quality is so bad at that point, then again, you just want to avoid it. Um, People are always talking about like low light performance, low light performance. That's all well and good. Like if you really do need to see and you have no other option than to just crank your ISO, you obviously want a camera that can do that better. But it's even like the Sony A7S series, which has always been touted as like that low light, um, like capability, or the low light beast. Cranking it up to 52,000 ISO is definitely not going to look anywhere near as good as ISO 640, which is what I have it on right now. But again, if you have no other option, then yeah, it's a way to see an image if you otherwise can't see one. But yeah, it's going to seriously degrade the quality of that image. On something like the A6500, A6700, in terms of photography, I haven't really tested, but usually if you're looking around maybe 3200 is a high ISO number that you're still gonna see grain, but it's still gonna be a good looking image. It's gonna have good contrast and saturation. Colors are gonna look normal, but it's gonna be grainier. And maybe 6400 is kind of would be that sort of upper limit that you'd want to go to, and still get an acceptable image. Of course, you can always do like a lot of noise reduction, but if you're going that high up to like 20,000, 30,000, especially on an APS-C camera, it's not going to look super great. On the video side, where you're also going to start getting that noise reduction kicking in, which is also going to make the image a lot softer and like kind of like plasticky, as it sort of like just sort of smooths over all the detail. And that's just not really a good look either. You always want to you always want to do everything you can to increase the exposure before you start cranking up that ISO. Hopefully that answers the question acceptably. Um, Rambler had a question about gimbal use in a car that's moving. Yeah, I've done that on any number of occasions. And any gimbal recommendations, are they a must-have accessory? It depends on what you do. I still have the DJI Ronin S, the original Ronin S, and now they are on to at least the RS3. So mine is pretty old, but it still works, and it does essentially it stabilizes the camera about as well as any gimbal can. Um, I guess the innovations with those big gimbals is just weight, the maximum payload that they can carry, and the gimbals themselves have gotten a lot lighter than the earlier ones. If you do a lot of client work, then a gimbal could really be a useful tool. I've used a gimbal tons and tons of times for client stuff. because it's a way that you can get dolly shots, all sorts of tracking shots. That's the only equipment you need. You don't need obviously a dolly and dolly track to do those kinds of shots with a gimbal. Um, and yeah, putting it in a car is going to just smooth out like all of that bumpiness from the car. And yeah, I think for client, if you do a lot of client work, if you're getting paid to make videos, then a gimbal probably is an essential tool. If you just make content for yourself, if you're just doing solo stuff, I mean, if you're doing it for YouTube and you're getting paid for it, then it's probably not essential. I've seen people try to use them as kind of a slider replacement, and they're kind of clunky for that use case. If you're in a confined space and you're trying to do like a really sort of precise and accurate move with a gimbal, it can be tough to do that. They're really meant for like really sweeping and interesting dynamic moving shots that are sort of on a bigger scale. So if you're sort of confined to a studio or a room, or if you're trying to film yourself, then they're not essential in my opinion. Something like the Osmo Pocket would probably be a better choice if you want a gimbal like shot, but that'll be much more doable for a single person to do if they're filming themselves especially. And the other thing too, like I said, I've got the DJI Ronin S, which came out probably in 2018, and it still works. It's taken a ton of abuse. It's been dropped any number of times. I think I lost the thumbstick on it, but you can still operate the thumbstick without the little kind of bulbous part on it. Um, and you can get those secondhand. And I guess the battery will probably die eventually, and that would probably be the one thing that would go on it. But the app, I think, is still working. That you can sort of dial in stuff with the app, but even the app isn't like essential. You can just get it to work without it. Anyway, let's see. I think that's all we got. Unfortunately, no more questions. Yeah, everybody who showed up, I really appreciate it. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for commenting. And hopefully, I'll see you in another one. Again, I'm going to try to make these as weekly as possible. And if you, no, I'm not going to ask any questions. Appreciate it. And hopefully, I'll see you again. Yes, end.